let's move on to the capital projects, because all this really ties together. I have different items on the agenda, but they all end up pretty much tying together in the end. A couple of big capital projects that we're either working on or we need to be working on. Obviously, the sewer plant, and I've got expansion, it's actually renovation. It is nearing completion. That was about a $5.5 million project that we incurred some debt service on. We talked about, you mentioned the water sewer fund, Verlin. You all actually essentially loaned yourself about $350,000 out of that fund to get the engineering and design work started, from what I understand. So we'll actually get that back when we go through the process and close out some of this. So we'll actually put that money back into the water and sewer fund when we move a little bit further along. So those numbers in the water and sewer fund are a little bit artificially deflated because you actually were in a financial situation to essentially loan yourself the money to get yourself started. So that may show up here in the future, that those numbers will come back up very well, or at least back on par with where they should be. The last change order that we had on the sewer plant basically indicates a significant or substantial completion date of the end of August, with a complete build-out completion date at the end of September, which is a little bit past the deadlines that were initially set. But there's been a couple of issues with some trying to get the line across over to the plant from Arthur Drake Road Pump Station, but we seem to be on track with that. And I'm going to throw some numbers out at you here that'll all come back into play in a few minutes. I talked to Wayne Price so I could get a very good understanding of the sewer plant renovations. And essentially, it's not necessarily going to increase our capacity. And Bill and Burrow may be able to correct me if I'm wrong. Current capacities that we can process out there is about 1.65 million gallons per day, and our current consumption, our current processing rate is about 1 million gallons per day. So we're in pretty good shape on what we're processing versus what our capacities are. The new plant's going to make us much more efficient in the way we actually do that. So it's certainly a worthwhile project that's hopefully near completion. The second part to that equation is the water plant. And Verlin and I sat through a presentation on your water study, or draft presentation on your water study that you've all contracted probably a year ago or so. And one of the things that's going to be very important to us in the future is your water and sewer. And here's where I think we need to go with our water and sewer. And the problem, the reason I'm tying this all together is it all costs money in the end. So it all goes back to the budget. What I would like to do is hopefully by June is take the draft water study that WK Dixon's doing for the town. We looked at some of their numbers. There's some issues that needed to be addressed with the draft study. They needed a little bit more information from us to really get their numbers hammered out. But by, hope for your June meeting, no later than the July meeting, we should come back to you, and we, by Dixon and the staff, should come back to you and give you some information and basically tell you where we're at on our water, particularly, and our sewer. And basically tell you what our capacities are, what we think your growth is going to be in the future. WK Dixon's looking at some growth based on population. Derek and I are actually looking at some things as far as growth based on the vacant properties that you have in the city limits, vacant properties you have in ETJ, how those are zoned, because how they're zoned actually ties back into their water consumption. You've got different usages for commercial versus residential. And basically get a really good snapshot of where we're at with particularly the water into this. And that way we can tell you, okay, here's what you're going to need sometime in the future for the city, and usually probably 15 years or 20 years or somewhere in that neighborhood. You know, here's what you're going to need for the ETJ. Here's where your growth areas are that we've already got lines from. We've already got infrastructure in somewhere. Here's where your growth areas are. Here's where we think your growth areas are going to be. And then tie all that back together with what our current capacity is and figure out, do we have the capacity to do that? And if we don't, and it's 10 or 15 or 20 years in the future, what do we need to meet those capacities 20 years down the road. And I'm gonna lay this on the table, and I told you all up front, we would discuss things from time to time that may or may not be controversial, but we're gonna put them on the table and discuss them anyway. At that point, and I'll be honest with you, the other big player in water and sewer is your other governments, and the only one we're gonna be involved with is Macon County. Occasionally, Macon County will want water or sewer or something somewhere, and I will be very adamant to you. I won't say I won't ever go for it, but I'm 99.9% sure I don't ever want to see a water authority. Town of Franklin needs to maintain control of your water system.
Absolutely.
I'm not against coming to the planning table with Macon County up front. Once we know what we need and once we know what we think we need for somewhere else, coming to Macon County and saying, okay, we've got 500,000 gallons extra, we've got 1,000,000 gallons extra, or we don't have anything extra. What do you think you need in the future? And at that point, we sit down and we decide what we can feasibly do to upgrade the water plant we currently have, whether we stay at the same capacity or whether we go bigger than that. Right now, you're capable of producing about 2 million gallons a day. The intake is permitted for 4 million gallons a day. And McGill actually did a flow study or the study to basically confirm that we can actually pull 4 million gallons a day out of the Cartooja without creating a habitat problem. It's one thing to be permitted for the intake, but it's another thing to be permitted or allowed to actually process that water. But we have everything in order to process 4 million gallons a day where we're at. The ideal situation I'd like to see is for us to present you with that data sometime this summer, preferably June, July. Allow you several months to ponder over that, to roll those numbers around, to look at the information we're gonna give you, the information WK Dixon's gonna give you, and come to terms that yes, you basically agree in concept that this is what we think we need in the future. Because I really and truly believe a lot of vacant properties in the city limits. You would be surprised, and Derek's sitting at the table, he can probably tell you more about it than I can. There are a lot of vacant properties in the city limits that I didn't realize were there when you really start looking at them. 100% of those are not going to ever probably develop in our lifetime. But we need to maintain a reasonable expectation that those folks are in the city limits, and we need to be prepared to provide for them somewhere if they decide they want it. Once we come to terms with what we're comfortable with producing for our current customers and the customers we've got in our general area, I have no problem going to Macon County sometime this fall and sitting down with them and saying, okay, here's what we need, here's what we've got, this is all we're gonna do. Here's what's left. If you think you're gonna need it somewhere, if you agree with where our growth is, then that's fine. But if you want water somewhere else, or you think you're gonna need another 500,000 gallons a day somewhere, you're gonna need another 1,000,000 gallons a day somewhere, then we need to come to terms with how we're gonna produce that and how we're gonna get it there. And at that point, they want to buy into this and help us if we go to renovate this water plant and they want an extra 1,000,000 gallons, then they can come to the table and pay for the extra 1,000,000 gallons that they're gonna need. And how we decide to sell it to them, that's fine with individual customers, or do a master meter and sell it to them and they meter it out. But what I don't want to happen, and well, this is the reason I want that time frame. We need to move on with doing some renovations at that water plant. It's a 5-year process. If you told me to start Monday, it'll be 5 years before we get through all the design, the permitting, all the financial stuff, get everything in order before we have that water plant up and running. So the longer we wait, it's 5 more years from every day we move on.
Do you believe it's that 5-year number's consistent, whether or not, and I don't know what decision we'll end up making, it's pretty obvious we'll have to get more water somewhere. Whether or not we try to go 4 million where we're at, or whether we go to a whole new location, do you think it was still the time frame would be? Seemed like it would be. Seemed like it'd be different if we were to stay with, not that we should, but given the 2 different options.
When I came into this, I always told everybody I didn't have preconceived notions about stuff when I came in. I'll be honest with you, I probably had one on this one. I really thought we probably should go somewhere else. The more I look at what we have, what's available out there, and the time frame that it would take to develop another water source somewhere, I almost think at this point you're probably better off staying there, because the numbers that Verlin and Billy have looked at in that draft study, even in 2035, I think the Dixon initial numbers only predicted about 3 million gallon a day plant would be necessary. So we've got way more capacity out there for water than what we're probably going to need.
And nobody can
We just need to be very efficiently. And I probably didn't believe that either when I came in here. So I sort of flip-flopped on that, to be honest with you. But if you change sources, you're probably looking at Merlin, correct me if I'm wrong, that day he was talking was 8 to 10 year process or longer to actually get the permitted, intake permitted somewhere else.
There's a lot of things to studying watersheds and that goes along with it, but I might add that the study was a little bit flawed. He had a little incorrect information, and at some point soon he come back with about a 14-page overall presentation to go for the board, and some of it is very, very interesting, and you know, we might incorporate some of those changes as we go along, but when that report comes out, that study report, well, you can see pretty clearly where we need to go, and with it, I thought it was well worthwhile to do that and to see, you know, what we really needed to do with it. But
and the reason that I'm sort of pushing that time frame is, like I said, we're 5 years from whatever date today that we could have that up and running. So it's not going to happen tomorrow. It's not going to happen this budget year. But I need to start budgeting some planning money now to get our engineering done, to get our surveys done. We probably want to update that flow study out there. It was done in 2002, but we probably want to refresh those numbers just to make sure we've got all our ducks in a row when it comes time to tell the state we're going above the 2 million gallons, if that's what we decide to do. So if we could come to terms with that as a board this fall, and then I could get it to Macon County and honestly to give them a couple of months for them to look at it and say, well, we know what you've got, but we want another 1 million gallons. That gives them a couple months to do that, but we need it back to us by this time next year, because by this time next year, planning for the 2014-15 budget, is that right? We need to be well on the way of finding those numbers out so we can get on with this process, because we don't want to drag this out any longer than we have to.
But don't we know that we have enough water if we just needed it for town? If we're using 50% of our capacity right now, that's another.
We do.
Right, I mean, so therefore, whether it's by active, the county coming in on a partnership or whatever, the demand's gonna be out in the county. And we're gonna have to find some way to keep those folks here on Forest Avenue and other places not to have to pay just to have water going out into the county. So, I mean, that's a real.
And as soon as we have a drought, people are gonna say, what are you gonna do about water? They think we don't have any.
Well, that's more of a storage. That's more of a storage issue. But it's all tied in together. But all of the growth, I mean, 90% of it's going to be outside the municipality. Isn't that just by the way?
it all depends, you know, what the legislature really does. If they take away our right to the ETJ, then as far as we're concerned, we should be pulling bigger businesses into town. In other words, you know,
And your water and sewer may drive those businesses back. The cost to extend that infrastructure to those rural areas, knowing that it's already here in the municipal limits, the difference in price they pay for that commercial property here versus in the rural may drive those folks back to the city limits. The water and sewer is really and truly going to be your driving factor.
Absolutely, and we're the only game in town. And we'll be the only game in town in the near future. So well, I guess so. As long as, I mean, it's a double-edged sword, but we are, whether we want it or not, we are. And I would hate to I'd hate to lose an industry or something because we just can't give enough water.
Yeah, I did. I had a preconceived notion like you, except mine hadn't changed. If we would have, if something happened and we had to shut down our water plant, how long could we survive? How much storage do we have?
Depends on what day it is, your daily usage fluctuates. And you actually have different zones, so it's a little difficult to calculate out exactly, but you've got probably a couple of days of water in each zone.
A couple of days. Three.
Yeah, I'm three's the number that
3
sticks in
days.
my head. Maybe 4 to 5, depending on your consumption, but
That's
three's.
still been my major concern, is that our whole water system is 1/2 an acre. And I'm still worried about that. I would like to suggest, Ken, that maybe that we look at a parallel study at the same time, because if it would take 15 years to come up with a new plan, at least we've got some of this paperwork behind us.
And that's one of the things that, if we get started in this and we realize we can live with 2 million gallons a day, then I agree that we need to be thinking 20 years out. And obviously, I would love to have a second source to get water.
Yeah.
I just think at this point, the urgency of us getting done what we need to do, we gotta move with this one probably first and then sort of move over into the other one. Part of that may be solved if we'll sit down, once we determine the course we wanna go, when we start designing it, you may wanna design some more off-site storage. You may wanna change your storage setup. There may be some ways to build another water tank to eliminate some of the zones. You may be able to put a tank somewhere else and eliminate some of the zones, and you don't have that problem with this zone running out and this zone having water. So that all needs to be considered in this big picture when we do this. One last thing on the water and sewer before we move on. The other important thing to remember, and this all ties back to the finances, everything goes back to money, right, Jan? The estimates that we have, these are just rough estimates. If you wanted to go plan, take what we've got and go to 3 million gallons, you're looking at about $18 million. You're looking at about $250,000 a year for the first 4 years to do your planning, permitting, engineering, and your pre-design stuff. You're looking at about a $17 million expense in the 5th year, which would be a debt service project we'd have to undertake. Any expansion of plants, it's basically $10 a gallon. If you want to expand 1 million gallons, it's about $10 million. Your guess is about $10 a gallon to expand. And I'll be honest with you, Macon County they may not need it, we may not need it, we may not need to go there, and that's a significant financial chunk for anybody to bite off. But we need to we need to get it on the table, and we need to discuss it now, because we don't want to wait 5 years and realize that we should have thought about it 4 years ago.
I think exactly what you're saying goes totally against the grain of what every town has always thought they need to do, and that's to grow. We don't really need to grow, as long as we've got viable economy, because growth is the most expensive thing the town can do. And I don't think we consider that sometimes.
And you actually have some methods built into your water and sewer rate structure to help that growth along, your availability fees. The price that folks buy into your system with, basically when they pay an availability fee, they're paying to essentially reimburse the taxpayers for what they put in for it over the years, so that everybody else is not paying for a system that somebody else is hooking on to. So we need to make sure that we keep that up and make sure we keep collecting it.
We would build a new plant at a new location with a capability of 4 million, 3 or 4 million gallons. What kind of cost are we looking for on that?
The cost of the plant itself probably won't change. You're probably still looking at about $18 million. The one thing that you'd have to add in consideration would be the cost of the property itself, which would be fairly significant. And
all the studies is going to.
Then you've got some significant costs with all the studies, and that's your time frame. Berlin, you're Billy, maybe I'll know this better than me, but to actually go to a new source, get it permitted and approved for intake's probably a 3-year process, if I'm not mistaken. Just to get the okay to build the plant to take the water out of there, not counting the design, the engineering, all that stuff, the plant itself. So you're looking at a significant time frame there too.
So we basically have a plant now that's capable of expansion and already dedicated water source coming into it. And I'm like Bob, I worry about a tractor
Well, I worry about it
chemicals
too.
dumping something in there, something happened to a Caterpillar, and they have a massive leak or something.
Well,
or
of
something
course-
happens there, so there's always those possibilities.
But
Think
today,
upstream.
yeah, today is not the day to decide whether we build where we're at or to get somewhere else. Today is to understand that we've got to start making steps towards that decision, right?
Yes, that's
Right,
correct.
yeah.
Any more questions or comments about
I might add one thing to it. If we haven't already resolved our water losses, especially those going through the master meters, we need to take care of that right away.
$10 a gallon is worth it, isn't it?
I mean, you know,
I mean, I'm serious.
If we're losing water that we're not being paid for, then we certainly need to take care of that
I agree.
immediately.
Do we have a lot of that?
We do have some significant losses, and there's one area in particular, and it's laid on the table. We have some significant losses at Mill Creek. We have individual meters up there, plus we have a master meter that meters everything going into the individual meters. The number, I actually have the numbers printed upstairs. It's up to 500,000 gallons plus per month. So if you, that's lost. And if you put that back into the equation on what our plant's currently producing, you can save a lot of water plants.
Is that where all that water is on number 11? That's the answer, buddy.
We don't know what the
Go
reason
up there and catch
Jay
it.
has
We'll
done,
see.
they've actually
Number
sent some
11
folks
stays
out there to
wet.
do some leak checks, because you can actually get state folks to go do that, and they haven't been able to figure out where it's going.
Wow.
And your options are, you can, there's a normal amount of loss you're gonna have on any system, which is 15%, it's a fairly good number. Ours right now is about 20%, but that takes into consideration, Mill Creek. It also takes into consideration, or doesn't take into consideration, the water that's used at the sewer plant, which now we've got a handle on that, because they use a lot of water at the sewer plant. They also use some water at the water plant to clean out the basins and stuff out there. So when we take those numbers out, our losses are 15, 16, 17%, somewhere in there. So realistically, if you have areas like that, not name a name, but if you have areas like that, you could go back and say, okay, let's take the 500,000 gallons a month. Let's assume 15% is a normal leakage, or 16% is a normal leakage, or whatever. And you would know what the difference is. It's actually probably going somewhere that we just can't figure what it is. And then at that point, it'll be up to y'all to decide, are we gonna bill off the master meter and let them figure it out, or what are we gonna do?
That 500,000 gallons also would include any water coming out of fire hydrants.
Yes.
So,
I understand we've been running quite a bit out of fire hydrants here lately.
And actually, one of the things I told Jay that we're able to do now, capability-wise, to make sure we have accurate numbers on those losses, most of our stuff's electronic. So anything we flow now, we can actually tell him how many gallons we've actually flowed. So if we'll feed that back to Will over to Public Works, he can take that out of the equation, which gives us even more accurate numbers.
you know, they've started a kind of a fire training academy out there southwest too, so where you were training with some departments just on Thursday nights, now it's 5 days a week. So that could account for something too. If it's something that started in the last couple of months, if it's something prior to that, that's not happening.
Warren, just to clear up something, back at the sewer plant, and this, all the money we're spending for the equalization basin, isn't it really that we're permitted to do 1.65, but actually I couldn't do it the way we're set up now, but we'll be able to get a whole lot closer to that.
Right, that's.
So actually, it does give
Right.
us,
It technically
effectively
does
more.
give you some expansion.
right,
We're not changing the numbers, we can actually,
But
right,
we're-
we're getting better at getting there.
that's right, yeah.
And it eliminates, the equalization basically eliminates,
The flooding of it,
good, keep it from running over,
yeah,
bypassing the sewer plant actually.
yeah.
We're ready to move on to some other things.